Bigger, bolder, faster. Boom, I'm going to the maximum. I'm going to the maximum. I'm going to the maximum.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Larry Namer. Can I actually get another round of applause? You do not know what he's gone through to be here this evening. This is an incredible man. How was the trip over from Los Angeles?
It was an adventure, I got to say. I tried to get here Sunday, tried to get on Monday. Finally, they let me on the plane on Tuesday. So, thank you, PAL.
So you're here. Let's start with your background. I mean, your first job in media. What was it?
Well, my first job right out of college, I couldn't get a job. So I ended up taking what I thought would be a temporary job at a early cable company called Manhattan Cable, and they gave me a job going under the streets of Manhattan with the roaches and the rats and splicing the cables together. So $90 a week, and it was quite an adventure.
So you went from cabling underground to owning a cable network or launching a cable network. What happened in between?
Well, when I got into it, it was just kind of at the very early days of cable, and people would always say to me, "Why are you wasting your time? Nobody will ever pay for television." Well, they were wrong. But I kind of grew up in the business. I worked for Time Incorporated when it was really a publishing company, Time Magazine, Time Life Books, and they made a conscious decision to become a media company over 10 years. So I was like right there at the beginning, and so I was part of the group that started Urban Cable, and then we started HBO, and there was this crazy guy that came out and said, "I'm going to put movies on satellites," and we looked at him and said, "What the heck's a satellite?" So I did that, and I ended up after a while being the head of operations in Manhattan. I think I was 25 years old, and I had 300 and some odd people reporting to me who literally ran everything in the cable company. And because I knew how to build underground, and Manhattan was the only underground system, when big cities began to realize that they wanted cable in not just to provide good reception, but more programming, they all wanted it to go underground instead of telephone poles. So a company won the franchise for Los Angeles, and they needed somebody who knew how to build underground, and they recruited me for like 4 times what I was making in New York. So I think I just turned 30, and they basically handed me a piece of paper from Toronto Dominion Bank saying, "Here, you have $400 million, and here's a franchise, go build us a cable system." So that's what I did. And that's where I began to get very interested in programming as opposed to just operations.
You said you wanted to do something different, and along came Entertainment. What was the start? What was the catalyst for that? And why did you want to do something different than what others were doing?
Well, it was actually kind of interesting because the company I worked for sold, and they were a Toronto company. So they said, "This is great, come back to Toronto with us." And I was like, no. I didn't go from Brooklyn to LA to go to Toronto. I said, "I'm done with the cold, I'm staying here." So a friend of mine from New Jersey, we were saying, "Okay, what is it we can do out here to stay here?" And again, you're a Brooklyn kid, and you're out in California, and everybody's going to parties and premieres and stuff like that. And I was going, "This is great. How do I get invited to those?" So Alan and I just came up with the idea. We looked at it was the early days of cable programming, and we looked at the case of MTV, and we said, "Okay, this is simple. They stand the host in front of a green screen and goes, and Madonna has a new video." We said, "We'll stand the host in front of a green screen and go, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie." So that's literally how the idea started. And then we just evolved it into being, about the media and entertainment business around the world. And, everybody told us we're crazy. They said, "You're not Ted Turner, you can't start a TV network." And we weren't smart enough to listen. And at that time, the going rate to start a TV network was somewhere between $60 and $100 million. After 3.5 years and nobody giving us 10 cents, we finally found a banker on Wall Street who said, I could give you $2.5 million. And we kind of said, what can you do with that? And we realized we're never going to get to 60 million. So we said, fine, give us the 2.5. And we took $2.5 million. I had a friend who was teaching radio, television, and film at University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and said, do you have any kids who need intern jobs? And he sent us 31 interns. So he actually started with 11 employees and 31 interns and not very much money. And our investors are very happy because the company's valued at about $5 billion today. So.
And it's touched lives around the world. People saw something on E that they've connected with. You've always been a champion of diversity. Tell me why that plays into, why that's such an important aspect of what you've done as a creator.
Sure. You know, with E, it was, you know, there's that saying that necessity is the mother of invention. Because we didn't have a lot of money, we had to be really inventive with the programming. And the first thing we did, we covered the Academy Awards, and we applied for credentials, and they refused. They said, oh, you're some dinky little cable channel, you can't get credentials. So what we did was we found the fence in the backyard, and we climbed over the fence, and we threw the stuff over, and we were filming until security caught us and threw us out. But when we put the stuff on air, the reaction was amazing. People saying, no, that's unbelievable, because you were asking questions that we were really interested in, like, what are you wearing? And so we actually started that trend, and people said it seemed so pirated. It's like, it was almost like you didn't belong there. Well, they were right. We didn't belong there, but, and that kind of led us on. And, you know, once we got a little bit of money and a little bit of traction, we started saying, okay, we'll do some original programming. And again, with not a lot of money. So the first show we came up with, everybody in the company, when I told them, thought I was out of my mind. I said, I want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And they were like, you can't do that. I go, why not? So we started Talk Soup. And Talk Soup ran 26 years and made a lot of the hosts very famous. And, you know, and then the second one, we were in an elevator in New York, and we met this tall guy who was telling us that he's a great, you know, radio personality, and we kind of went, yeah, okay, great, radio's dead. But then he said, no, come and watch my show. And when I went and watched the show, I said, oh my God, this is not just a radio show, this is a sitcom. And so I went back and I told the team again, I said, okay, I got another idea. I want to put cameras in this guy's radio studio and film him doing the radio show. And they were like, Larry, you know, radio's dead 40 years. What are you thinking? I said, trust me on this one. Well, that guy turned out to be a guy named Howard Stern, and Howard ran 7 years. And so a lot of it, we just had to do it. And we really didn't have a lot of ego. We really said, okay, what does the audience want to know about Hollywood? You know, then everybody was doing, so tell us, Tom Cruise, about your next movie project. You know, boring. You know, we were more interested in finding out, you know, where he bought his shoes and things like that. And the audience just loved it. They felt they were seeing something that they really weren't supposed to be. So we had this very pirate kind of attitude.
So we're here several years later. You continue to be, you could retire, you could just relax. And it's interesting, the comment and your experience, the stories that you share remind me of the saying, it's not about who's keeping me or who's letting me in, it's about who's going to keep me out, right? So I feel like your story speaks to that.
Yeah, you know, after what, E grew so big, and, you know, we started with nothing, and we were the fastest growing cable system in the world. In our first year, we were in 14 other countries and stuff like that. But it became so corporate that, you know, I stopped having the ability to be creative and do the things that I love. So I just said, fine, I'm going to hire someone to run the day-to-day, and I'm going to go off and do stuff around the world. And when I was figuring out where do I go, I said, okay, let me find places where Rupert Murdoch isn't welcome. And I use Rupert as kind of the symbol of the devil. So I ended up going to Russia, and oddly enough, I ended up having the #1 TV show in Russia 5 days a week for 10 years. I figured they've read enough Dostoevsky, I'm going to give them soap operas. And they would watch the soap operas, and we had a 80% audience share. 8 out of every 10 people watching TV in Russia were watching the dopey stuff we put on TV there. So that was my Russia days.
Russia, China. You have not just started E, of course, E Entertainment, but multiple organizations and companies around the world, China as in addition. And now you're moving in, you could retire, as I was saying earlier, you could just play golf, but we know how much you love golf. So instead, you are here and we're excited to hear about why you're entering the space and how long you've been doing it. Immersive technology. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, after Russia, after our 11-year run of soap operas ended there, and we did run 11 years, I decided, where else could I go? I said, let me find an even more difficult one. I said, let me go to China. So I've been in China now for about a decade. I've actually written the #1 comedy in China that was nominated at the Asia TV Awards, and people couldn't believe it was written by a non-Chinese person. But I think my whole life I've always wanted to be about what's next, not about what was. So I got involved in kind of new ways of financing and creating stuff. So I've been involved in blockchain and crypto and NFT world for quite a while now, and I think the FTX thing has kind of set the timetable back a little. But there's no question it's going to come. I mean, it's just a matter of when is the world going to get over the shock of what's happened with the FTX thing and the fallout of some of the other exchanges that are out there. So, as Aaliyah said, people say, why don't you retire? You got plenty of money. And my answer is, what do I do in the morning when I wake up with 10 new ideas? I love starting new companies, and I do a lot of stuff in the streaming world now. Because as a creator, streaming gives me a lot more flexibility than creating movies for a movie theater.
You also have taken on a lot of social good projects. You jokingly say that you're on your redemption tour now, which we'll get to that later. But, what is your focus in utilizing these technologies? And they're obviously attractive to you. How is it that you're able to integrate that with the social good work you do as well?
Yeah, as Aaliyah said, people say, what are you up to these days? And I basically say, I'm on my Kardashian redemption tour, where I'm only doing like socially good or socially responsible programming. So I'm doing a streaming service called Beauty Queen, which is it's a communications content platform really meant for the fringes of the LGBTQI plus community. Doing a lot of stuff in the streaming world. I just created a series that went to Crackle about financial wellness for millennials, both EQ and IQ. So it's not just how you get a credit card, it's all the emotion that goes into financial decisions. And that's actually an interesting one because my daughter was getting married. First when somebody came to me with the idea, it wasn't mine. I said, it sounds really boring to me. I don't want to do that. But my daughter was getting married. And my daughter came to me and said, hey, Dad, what's a prenup? And I'm like, how do you not know what a prenup is? Don't they teach you anything in school? Well, the fact of the matter is they don't teach them anything in school. People go out of school terribly unprepared for real-life financial stuff. And then, after I said, go see the family lawyer, he'll tell you all about a prenup. My daughter came back and said, well, how do I explain this to AJ without him thinking that I don't love him forever? And I realized how much emotional stuff goes in. So we just created a series about that. Just finished up doing the development of a series called Conscious Parenting, where I found this woman who's doing TED Talks about parenting. And the basis of her whole thing is kids are people too, treat them that way. And I remember when I grew up, it was kind of, children should be seen and not heard. And now it's a very different time if you think of the last 20 years and the way parenting has changed. It's dramatic. I mean, you got bullying, you got school shootings, you have gender identity issues and stuff. It's really hard to be a parent. And the thing I learned, particularly with my daughter, is you never stop being a parent. Doesn't make a difference how old they get. You're still their, you're still their parent.
True, and thank you so much. I don't know if my mic is on. Is my mic on?
No.
It's definitely not on. Sound. Okay, thanks for, I really feel it's important. This is your second time to Manila, and thank you for sharing so much of your background, your story, on how you've arrived here. Moving to cryptocurrency and NFTs and a little bit more about blockchain, why do you think this is attractive to the entertainment world?
Well, number one, I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parts that I'd answer, but just as a creator, it's really simple. If I were to paint something and sell my painting to Aaliyah for $100, I got $100. And then she sells it to someone else for $1,000. She made $900, and I still got my $100. And then that person sells it to a museum for $1 million. I'm standing there, oh my God, I got $100 and somebody just made, almost $1 million bucks. So all media is really based on good storytelling, and there are very few people who could do it, and all of us, with no exceptions, are looking out, how do we stay attached to the money flow that is derived from the products that we create? And the answer is blockchain. It's a way to protect IP. It's a way to stay in the revenue stream. Again, I think we're early on. I think there have been problems. I think FTX is, certainly a good example of people who check their brains at the door and put money into that thing. But the fallout is going to last a year, and it's going to normalize and stuff, and it's inevitable. NFT world, I studied for about a year. I looked at everybody doing NFTs and realized 90% were BS. But 10% were not. And there's a lot of good NFT projects out there that are basically value add. And those are, I attach myself to a few of those. And again, I like to jump in almost like a method actor, so I force myself I know if I put myself in a situation, I'm smart enough, eventually I'll learn it. So I'm doing a lot in the NFT world. So I think the whole thing comes together, whether you want to call it Web3 or Metaverse or whatever, it's all one thing. And it's such a useful opportunity for the media world. And when I say media world, I really do mean world. The days where everything was US-centric are long gone. You got to create for the world, and this is the ideal way of getting things funded and tracked and revenue streams, and it's great for the creators who really force the industry to make the changes.
I know we're going to take a couple more minutes. I hope you guys don't mind, because I think that I heard you earlier speaking on such an amazing part when we talk about all the things the different technologies offer. Hologram was something that really excited you. And share with me why that is, or with us, rather.
Sure. People now, I love holograms, and people are thinking about it, for how it's entertaining. I actually go a different way. I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, to see Michael Jackson dance or Tupac, big deal. But I think the implications on the world of education are incredibly dramatic. I sit on the board of something called the Einstein Foundation. When Albert died, he left all his IP to Hebrew University in Israel. And there are hundreds of hours of video of Albert talking about every subject you could imagine. And I said, what if we were to create holographic Albert and beam him into universities around the world? Again, if you go to an auditorium of any college, you'll see 500 kids sitting there basically sleeping while some boring instructor is, trying to explain something. I said, well, what if I would have Albert teach the, theory of relativity in China in Mandarin, and in Nigeria in Nigerian, and in Portugal in Portuguese? The implications are that we could take the smartest people in the world on any subject and actually create holographic representations of them teaching any subject. And basically what that does is you're leveling you're leveling education around the world. A kid in Africa is going to get taught by the same person who's teaching, somebody in New York or California. So I'm really high on that. I think it's amazing. I think the implications on, again, leveling the playing field of education and really nurturing kids with like huge brains that are not necessarily close to the resources, but bringing those resources to them.
Agreed. In closing out, you've spent all these years developing a legacy that touches lives, continues to, and will, for many years to come. Right now, as people are evolving in this space, what is your biggest piece of advice? I mean, I've already heard do your due diligence, definitely that. Be creative, think outside of the box. What is your biggest piece of advice right now for this audience?
Sure. I'm actually the anti-follow your passion person. I think so many people listen to that BS, follow your passion. Sometimes your passions are not great. Sometimes they're not good ideas. The only thing that you have really is time, and time is finite. And if you follow your passion and it's not a good idea or the environment changes, literally, I wake up in the morning with 10 new ideas every day. By the time I go to sleep, I realize probably all 10 were pretty dopey. Every once in a while, I'll have a good one. But every night, I self-assess all my ideas, and I'm really honest with myself. I go, okay, it may have been a good idea, but the environment has changed, or the technology has changed. If I keep following my passion, I'm spending all my time following something that can't really be good, as opposed to taking that time and putting it to things that actually can work. So, my advice is, be honest with yourself and really assess the things you're working on and stuff. And again, if you're honest with yourself, you'll have the time to put towards things that really do make a difference and could be successful.
Thank you so much, everybody. Can you please stand up and give Mr. Namer a round of applause?
Philippine Doctrine Week. See you next year.